Whenever you rent or buy a video, you need to be sure that the film you choose is suitable for the audience at home.
Do sit down. We're just about to have some tea.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic, but scream. Scream for your lives.
Hail weirdos, the kettle's boiled. Welcome to Tea for Terror, where we take a favourite horror film and dissect it over a nice cup of tea. I'm your host, Andrew Graves, and my guest today is only seeing the devils tearing his life away. Welcome, Tim Dry. How you doing?
Hello. That's the best intro I've ever heard, I think. Fantastic.
It's all downhill from now on.
Yeah. See you then. Bye. Anyway, okay, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Great. How you doing? What have you been up to? Busy, I'd imagine.
Crikey. Well, I did a Star Wars autograph show in sunny Folkestone on Saturday, which is great fun. I've done the same show last year and another one by the same organizers in December in Croydon, which is unfortunately too near my hometown. But no, that's that. I've got another Star Wars show coming up in June, and I've recently published my novelette onto Kindle Direct Publishing, and it's called The Dream Diary of Tarquin Goldring. And so that's what I currently oscillate between, either appearing, signing photographs of me as a furry alien in Return of the Jedi, or getting writing done, or releasing music and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, it's possible that until this meeting that we're having now, it's possible that I might have in the past have walked by you at one of these conventions, because I used to be. I used to be. No, I don't. I'm not.
You just thought, whoa!
It's not an insult to you. That's just
that guy
not knowing what I'm doing. I used to do. I'm all right. Fucking nerd. I used to do tons of those like conventions. I was constantly at those conventions. I loved them, you know. But I think they just got more and more expensive and stuff, and so I kind of go to a few of them now and again, you know.
I did a big one back in April last year called Celebration Europe at Xtro, and that is the officially huge one, you know. And it used to be run by sort of nice people, and this time it was like I charged £20 for a signed photograph, right? Which is all right, I think. Okay, Celebration Europe said, "Oh, we're going to charge people 49 quid for your autograph. You still get your 20, but we keep the rest." And I just thought, that ain't good. Also, people had to pay some ridiculous amount, 30, 40 quid just to get in.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know what? When I started doing conventions, which was 21 years ago, it was all very nice and very simple. You didn't have to come in, pay to get in. You just walked in. People like myself and all the other Jedi guys are signing for a few dollars or whatever. That was it. Now it's such a big business.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I think there was kind of a golden. No, I hate to say golden age because I think that's a bullshit term usually, but I think there was kind of window for guys like me, I guess, who was very nerdy guys who could go to those things. I remember between sort of about 2000 and 2004, so I used to go to quite a lot of those places, and I've got posters all over the place, big quad posters signed, and I've got in my landing, I've got an Empire Strikes Back poster, which is signed by pretty much everybody. And just by going to these things, it's unbelievable now. But I got Carrie Fisher, I got all of those people, practically everybody, and then I've got a Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring poster, which is signed by sorry, Two Towers poster. Sorry, so it started off with Christopher Lee. I was lucky enough to get Christopher Lee.
Wow.
But each of those, those autographs were, I think for Carrie Fisher, I was paying like 20 quid.
You're
And
kidding.
now that just seems like insane.
Well,
You couldn't get close to any, even someone
no,
like half of Carrie Fisher's kind of fame and fortune, you'd be paying probably double that.
I
It,
know.
it's crazy.
It's all become, well, it's like everything else, isn't it? It's become a grotesquely massive organization to make money, you know.
Which is nothing to do with the people there. That's the thing. And it's kind of like it's
No,
putting a bigger wedge between people like yourself and the actual fans. I think that's a
okay,
shame.
what I loved about doing the show in Folkestone on Saturday, I think there were 15 of us maybe signing, not no one huge, but we're all in Jedi or the first one or the whatever one, a couple of guys from Mandalorian. Um, but it was all very cool, very casual, because they can come up to you and they always want to chat to you, and you have a chat and they say, okay, so, oh, which photograph should I get? And you sign it and they give you the dosh, but they've had a good time. You've actually interacted with them, And I think what happens at these really huge shows is that the signer doesn't want to interact with fans. He just wants to, okay, yeah, sign it, boom, sign it, boom, sign it, boom.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all become very weird. So I do like the smaller shows, excuse me, but of course you don't make as much money from those, but I'm very grateful I make any money from it, to be honest. It's a movie I did 42 years ago,
Yeah.
There you go.
I guess, yeah, I mean, we mentioned Return of the Jedi there, but I guess in terms
Hmm.
of kind of audience for this show, I guess I think the thing that probably, obviously you've done a number of things in your, I had
Sure.
Barbie, or who Barbie Wild on a few
Of course I do.
episodes ago. He's incredible. She's brilliant, and
Yeah.
like, obviously you go way back with Barbie. You've got connections with Barbie from
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Shock Days and all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and the sort of
Oh,
music.
she's probably already spilt the beans about
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. But of course, a lot of people who maybe listen to this will probably
Yeah.
know you from Xtro. That's a kind of the
Oh,
very sort of cult
there's another story.
horror
Right.
film from back in the days in this sort of
Yeah.
video
Yeah.
nasty age. So
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel about that now? Is that kind of just
What?
something that you just did, turned up for, and it's just this
Okay.
followed you
Well,
around, or
at the time, I had a male partner and we were called Tick and Tock and we used to
yeah.
do cabaret and all that stuff. And we were working at a cocktail bar called Coconut Grove, just off Oxford Street one night, sometime in early 82. No, probably 81, I think. Anyway, and we used to do our robotic sort of mime act, scaring people. And there were two guys sitting at a table, and they said afterwards, "Hey, guys, come over. We're putting together this movie, a sort of horror sci-fi movie, and we'd love you two guys to be in it." And we said, "Yeah, So we had a meeting with them, and they said, "Okay, Tim, we want you to play this sort of commando GI character who comes to life and murders an old lady." I thought, yeah, I can do that. And I said, "Sean, we want you to be this alien reptile kind of creature." So he said, "Yeah, whatever. Okay." And then a couple of weeks later, it's like, "Oh, Tim, we want you to be the alien and Sean to be the commando guy who bayonets the old lady to death, Anyway, so I had to have my whole body cast in plaster to play this alien creature. And that is not
No.
as an experience, especially for men, because you don't tend to, have a Brazilian or something. Anyway, we did all that. They met, and of course, I had to be cast in the position I'm in the movie, which is like sort of crab formation. So filming starts in the woods in Buckinghamshire in March, which is not a pleasant all night, and I'm encased in this ghastly, horrible, whiffy rubber suit. I can't see where I'm going. And the director said, "Okay, Tim, great idea. Let's put the head on backwards, right? So that'll really freak people out when they see you crawling but your head's got whatever. And I did a couple of weeks on that, and it was the most ghastly experience ever, you know. And eventually the film came out, and the director, well, I won't mention his name, but you probably know it anyway. He also wrote the music, and it was this dreadful, cheesy kind of early 80s kind of scary woo music. And I remember going to the preview of the movie and thinking, Christ, this is shit, isn't it, really? And so I just blanked it for years and years and years, you know. And it was only actually fairly recently, when I say probably 10 or 12 years ago, that people started to say, oh, Xtro, wow, it's a cult movie, man. Because it wasn't actually on the list of video nasties in the UK, but it was just underneath the list, you know, which was enough to make it sort of desirable.
It didn't even make the list.
No, God damn it. I just as an adjunct, several years ago, I found myself doing an autograph convention in Holland with Mariam Darbo, who was in Xtro, and it was her first movie role. Excuse me. And she's virtually naked for most of it, you know. And I said, oh, hi, Mariam. I was in Xtro too. I was the horrible alien. And she was a bit, whoa, okay. And as a terrible joke, I said, oh, you know, at the convention tomorrow, you have to be naked. For a moment, she went, what? I said, sorry, I'm joking. But up until that point, I'd ignored the whole movie. But some guy came up to me with a VHS copy of it. No, a DVD copy of it. Wow. Because I couldn't buy it. I never had a copy of it, you know, so I couldn't watch it in horror at home. But this guy had a really dodgy DVD copy. And I got home from the convention and I thought, oh, come on, let's watch it, you know. So I put on this DVD of Xtro, and at various scenes, it suddenly switches into German. You know the scene where the commando sort of bayonets the old lady under the sofa or something? It suddenly goes to, and I thought, wow, that's really odd. And the sort of whole quality of the movie changed. It went a bit sort of woo. And then it goes back into the English version again. And it kept happening. It's going into German. I thought, wow, that's actually quite amusing. But yeah, anyway, Xtro, it was a horrible experience. But now I actually quite like the fact that I'm in it.
Well, it had a bit of a resurgence a few years back because Second Sight, you know, they released their kind of nice deluxe
Second Sight
version of it.
Mark Morris and Jake West. Yeah, that was a good one, and we did it. He managed to get most of us together to do an interview. So there's me, Sean Crawford, Robert Carino, Susie Silphy, who I actually impregnate in the movie, Mark Forstater, producer, and good old Harry Bromley Davenport, the director, you know, who suffers eternal guilt for actually directing Xtro 2 and Xtro 3. Anyway, but that's that little segment of my life.
So how? Okay, so this is what I normally ask guests who coming on for the first time is
right.
How did you make your personal connection with horror then? Is it as in you getting into horror as a kid or whatever? Where was your starting point?
Crikey. Okay. I think I must have been about 12 years old, and my mum took me to see Psycho at our local cinema in Red Hill, Surrey. I think because I was tall, I could pass for being, you know, a sort of young adult. And I remember watching this movie, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen, because in England in the 50s, you didn't get horror in that respect, you know. And I remember watching this black and white movie and thinking, I didn't get the subtext about, guilt and theft and everything else. But I do remember the shower scene, obviously, everyone does. And I remember a large part of the audience actually screaming. And I thought, wow, the fuck. And then at the same time, I was obsessed with the Pan Book of Horror Stories.
Yes.
You know, those little
Yeah,
paperback
yeah.
anthologies?
We've talked about them a lot on this show.
Right. And God, I wish I'd kept some. I had all of them, all the ones at that time. And there were certain stories that I just suddenly thought, wow, there's something else out there rather than stuff in here, because I've always been a vivid dreamer. But there were stories like Men Without Bones. I thought, oh, God. And the famous one that they did actually make into a TV version was that the guy who gets the earwig in his ear and he eats through his brain. It's Lawrence Harvey, I think. And that really made me think about stuff, And then a few years later, the whole Hammer horror thing started. And to this very day, actually, my very, very favorite Hammer movie is The Devil Rides Out.
Yeah.
And I went to see that probably in 68, I think. So I was now 15, 16, whatever. And it was on a double bill in my local cinema with a documentary called Groupies. And it was all about the groupies in Los Angeles who were shagging rock stars and stuff. So I'm thinking, well, that's fucking weird, isn't it? On one hand, you've got incredibly wonderful Christopher Lee and terribly malevolent Charles Gray and, Galadim, Galada. It's like, whoa, no, shut up. And then you've got, hey, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm getting my cock sucked by, and it's just like, oh, why would you put the two of those together?
It fascinates me. See, there's something about the 70s, I think,
Yeah.
that they would do that. There's a podcast I listen to, Joe Dante's podcast called The Movie Made Me, and one of the guests, the idea is the guest comes on and they give like 10 examples of various films that they're into. But one
Right.
guest came on and he came on with 10 different very incongruous double bills, actual
Right.
double bills, because it
Okay.
was like you'd have things like that. I remember,
Yeah.
and people always tell me that I'm kind of dreaming this, but I am absolutely positive that it was right. When I went to see Star Wars 77,
Yeah.
I was 6 at the time, so it's one of the
You
first
bastard.
cinematic experiences I saw. So.
Yeah.
And I remember, I am absolutely convinced. I am the support film for Star Wars when I saw it was Queen live in concert
Wow.
with, and again, that's like it kind of
Okay.
makes sense, but it's bizarre as well. But yeah, it's a thing.
Well, it's covering all
there
your
wasn't
bases,
really
isn't it?
that much because you still had that double bill thing in the 70s.
Sure.
It wasn't always that. Shall we say curation that you might
Yeah,
get
or complementary.
together. Yeah.
But I've got to tell you, my favorite double bill, and it's from the 70s. It must have been, 77, I think, at the Essential Cinema in Wardour Street, Soho. Double bill of Don't Look Now and The Wicker Man.
Yeah, well, that they tried to bury the Wicker Man.
Fucking hell.
The studio just lost interest. They didn't
Right.
want to promote it. It didn't even get a premiere. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody got paid. I don't think it was purely down to the fact that Christopher Lee was
Yeah.
able, when he was promoting another film, he was able to go to the States and promote it, that it developed this cult following. But that's the
Yeah.
reason it was on a double bill with Don't Look
But
Now, 'cause they
again,
were trying to
because
bury it.
I loved Performance. Performance is my all-time favorite movie.
Yeah.
Okay. And Nick Rogue, he co-directed that, and then he did The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah.
Starring my all-time favorite performer. And then he did Don't Look Now, which is based on a Daphne du Maurier short story. And I thought, wow, this is wonderful. This is really intriguing. some people say, "Oh, Don't Look Now is the best British horror movie." Well, see, this is the thing that I need to talk about, is that my definition of horror is very different to the conventional geographic definition of horror. Horror to me is about psychological damage, you know, and Don't Look Now is a psychological thriller. And then having gone through that, you know, whoa, suddenly The Wicker Man starts up. It's like, what is this about, you know? And I've never actually liked the late Edward Woodward. You know, if you take all the D's out of his name, it's Iwa Wuwa. Yeah, I know, old joke. But I'm watching that and I'm thinking, yeah, God, this is all a bit. And then suddenly you clock into what it's all about, you know, this sort of ancient, ritualistic, naturalist, there's a word, paganism, you know. And I thought, wow, I came out of that cinema 3 hours later, dribbling with stuff. It was like, what the fuck, you know? So that was great. But then they stopped doing double bills, didn't they?
Yeah.
You don't get them anymore, I don't think. Anyway, so going back to your initial question. So it was a Pan Book of Horror Stories, really, and then Hammer horror movies. And of course, then you start to think about, oh, the original Dracula, the original Frankenstein, you know. Because growing up in 50s Britain, there wasn't not a lot around, you know. We didn't get a TV for about 8 years, you know. And it was a TV in a wooden cabinet about 5 foot high with a screen the size of a large paperback. And Dad always used to sort of get angry and hit it, go fuck sake, because it was always going. And so 61, 62, we had Doctor Who, I think. But there was nothing else, you know. So my horror interests were hidden behind Pan books, and I can't think of any other movies I would have seen apart from Psycho that really changed my desire for them, you know, because I was really into James Bond and all that stuff, as most hetero boys are, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean those you know, there's the original Ian Fleming Bond books. I mean, whatever
Had those as well.
you think about the whole kind of political spectrum and all that, and you know, obviously James Bond is a very unwoke character, shall we say? But you know, but those Fleming books, they are still a fantastic read. They are brilliant. You know, you got to kind of put all your 21st century ethics aside, but they are fucking amazing. You know, and there are some true moments of horror in there. You know, I think is it Live and Let Die. I think where Felix gets kind of attacked by the alligators. Shark. Sorry,
and he loses a leg or an arm or something.
I remember reading that, thinking, Jesus Christ,
didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
Hey, but actually, another trigger was because I went to a grammar school, and I was studying for A-level literature, and one of the books we had to read was Lord of the Flies, because I from 7 till 12, I was at a private public school. And then I went to this grammar school. And Lord of the Flies is about a group of public school boys, you know, because in public school, you have prefects who are uber masters, and then you get the normal plebs. And then you get the slightly sort of troubled youngsters. Imagine what happens if all of those are on a plane and the plane crashes on a deserted island. Who's going to take dominance? And that really disturbed me, because I thought, well, I know this world. So to me, that was a genuine horror read. And also Peter Brook's black and white movie of it, which is, I can't remember when he made it, early 60s maybe.
Yeah,
very,
so
very close to the, you know, but don't think about the ghastly American remake. And don't get me started on ghastly American remakes. Otherwise, I'm going to have to mention No, don't go there. Anyway, poor old Nick Cage is anyway. But Lord of the Flies, I just found still to this day, I actually contacted the William Golding estate a few years back to say, look, I want to write a sequel to Lord of the Flies, because from 12 years onwards, I've always thought, well, what happened to those boys when they actually got back to civilization? Because you had Jack, who's the kind of innocent Luke Skywalker kind of character, and then he's the baddie. It's Ralph, who's the sort of ingenue, if you like. And the book ends with him on the beach and the whole island's on fire, and Jack and his painted goons are coming after him, and he looks up and he just sees the feet in these white plimsolls and white socks of a naval officer, and that's it. And I've always thought, well, what the fuck happened when they got back? What happened to Jack? Did Jack become a serial killer, or did Jack become an accountant, equally as bad? What happened to Ralph? Did he get married, have kids, settle down, or And I just thought, wow. So that was another horror trigger, if you like. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. He talks about Don't Look Now, and I think there's a direct correlation between that film and the film we're going to be talking about today. So on that note, I think we should probably introduce the film. So the film you have chosen, which I'm very pleased you did, because it's an excellent choice.
All right.
It's Jacob's Ladder from 1990, directed by Adrian Lyne.
Every day, Jacob Singer goes to work.
What's wrong?
It's just one of those days.
And every day, he wonders what is happening to him.
Maybe it's the pressure, Jake.
They're like demons, Jess. They weren't human.
Tim, when was the first time you came across this film?
Yeah. To be perfectly honest, I have no idea. I must have seen a trailer for it watching another movie around 1990, maybe 91. But I have no memory of what that other movie was. But I remember watching the trailer and thinking, fuck, this is something else, So when it came out, I actually watched it and I found it genuinely disturbing. On a level or levels that I'd never experienced from a movie before. Yes, Don't Look Now, Wicker Man, Psycho, they all had some kind of triggering effect. But this one was on so many different levels that I couldn't really process it properly. So it took a long time for me to get it on DVD. So when I did, I really watched it again and again and thought, this is such a clever movie, and but it didn't it wasn't blazoned everywhere as being a great horror movie. So it was like it sort of slipped under the radar, really.
Yeah.
Because part of it is about PTSD, Vietnam survivors, which obviously people think, oh, it's like Platoon or Born on the 4th of July or, another traumatic war movie. But it suddenly goes into places that I've never seen another movie go into. And, there's many reasons. I probably will go into them all, but I don't know. I felt like I was part of a sort of an elite club in a way, that people actually watched this movie and thought, this is actually really good. And the strange thing about the movie is that it's directed by Adrian Lyne, who basically is famous for 9.5 Weeks and Fatal Attraction.
Flashdance.
Oh, okay. I wasn't going to mention that one, but hey, obviously your favorite. But I thought, well, I didn't think it at the time because I wasn't really au fait with, who directed what. But looking at it now, it's like, what an interesting choice for directing this bizarre fucking movie. Now, these days, I think, well, what would have happened if Guillermo del Toro directed it? But what I love about the movie, and I did watch it again the other day just to refresh myself, is that it's very, very well shot, and there's little moments that, horror movies these days are all full of jump scares, whoa, oh, didn't see that one coming. But 8 minutes into Jacob's Ladder, he's on the metro, underground tube station, whatever the fuck it is in America, and he's just woken up from a flashback to his Vietnam experience. And he's reading a book, and you think, oh, and he goes into the next carriage, and there's an old lady sitting there, and he says, "Hey, sorry, have we gone past, the stop for whatever it is, Bergen something?" And she just looks blank and doesn't understand, like she's hearing a foreign language. Oh, okay, whatever. And he looks across, and there's a homeless guy asleep on one of the sort of, or across several seats, covered in stuff. And just for a nanosecond, you see this sort of tentacle thing. And he looks at it and thinks, whoa. But hey, I'm obviously, just woken up, bit spaced. And that the movie starts to move into these several different planes. One is about a traumatic recollection of what happened in Saigon or whatever. But it's also about the loss of his son, the divorce, his new partner, he's now a postman. It's like, fuck's sake, Sorry, I'm going to go into what really triggers me, but carry on. Sorry.
No, I think that right from the beginning, I mean, this film, not a lot of horror films, but bad horror films tend to be all about text rather than subtext, whereas there's a lot of subtext in this, and I think there's a lot of really nice symbolism, and I think we start off with that, with the train, the tube, or whatever, and there's a theme that runs all the way through this. He can't get home. We've got the homeless person. We've got him trying, he gets off the track in the middle of nowhere. He's a mailman that never does his job. He never delivers the message. He never delivers the mail. There's all this. He's surrounded all the way through the film. If you look very closely, there are exit signs all over the place. The clues are there right from the. It's brilliantly put together. It's a fantastically symbolic. I don't want to sound all wanky and pretentious, but there's so much imagery in this. It's so rich with that language.
So when you first contacted me, I thought, okay, I don't want to do the obvious. Barbie did Psycho, bless her, brilliant. Hellraiser would be another one, probably going to be done. Silence of the Lambs, favorite movie, and then I thought, okay, I want to choose a movie that has no supernatural elements in it, because I am a little bit tired of Dracula's, vampires, zombies, whatever. What truly horrifies me is what people do to other people. And so I thought, I loathe movies like Hostel or Saw. That's torture porn. That's something else. That's not horror. That's just fuck up, But for me, it was either this movie or White of the Eye.
Yeah.
By Donald Cammell.
Yeah, it's good. Yep.
And Donald co-directed or wrote Performance, which is, as I said earlier, is my favorite movie ever. And so this one really intrigued me because it is about a serial killer, but it's not the usual Hannibal Lecter or, oh, come on, all of them. But it's a guy in the Midwest who repairs or installs hi-fis, So it's a terribly mundane existence for him. And to me, that's what's horrific about life, is the mundanity of it. If you look at Rillington Place, you think John Reginald Christie, just a normal guy who's a projectionist in a cinema in Labatt Grove, is a serial killer. but you live next door to him. You don't know. And it's so mundane. That's what's horrific. You know, so I had to choose a movie that had no supernatural elements at all. So I ended up with this one because I still find it probably the most disturbing movie I've ever seen.
See, according to this, you're already dead.
Yeah, so I you know, I would argue, I mean, this is one of the reasons I was really glad you chose this film, because as we just mentioned, I think there's a lot of subtext, and there's the text is very, it's not easily discernible in some ways. It's you know, it's a different kind of thing that we might expect from a kind of 90s horror film, because I think that's the other thing, is that the reason it possibly flew under the radar, it's become a cult thing now, but it didn't. I think for a lot. I think around that time there were some key examples that were great, but I think largely, American horror films had really lost their way by that time. You'd gone through the whole kind of splatter film, sort of video nasty stuff, and you were entering the sort of 90s, and I don't think people really knew what to do with a horror film, which is why slightly later on you ended up with the kind of influx of films from Japan. You got the whole J horror, because they were offering something new, and it wasn't really until later on in the mid 90s when you get in things like Scream, which was very much Wes Craven sort of dismantling his own sort of slasher film.
An homage, isn't it, rather than a genuinely original horror. Yeah,
but this was something very different and much darker, and spoke to that kind of greater thing of, well, this says a lot about, it's not just about an individual. It's not just, this is about, you know, you could argue this is about the American psyche. You know, a lot of those really good films were about that.
Yeah, you could go that route. Yeah, but I think for me, probably why it didn't catch, you know, is because it's a cerebral movie. You know, it's not just about one thing. Most horror movies are always about the same sort of tropes, you know. I mean, if I'm going to list favorite horror movies, I would say that Hellraiser is definitely one of the most original horror movies I've ever seen, and I think it's brilliant. I think Clive Barker did an extraordinary writing job on all of his work, actually. But most horror movies these days, it doesn't work for me, you know. And there's a couple of Insidious or Sinister, and you know, but even those are sort of under the radar jobs. They're not, because people want jump scares. They want wow, wow, wow. And if you go back to 1990, when it was released, 91, I guess, this movie wasn't really categorized as a horror movie. It was more, oh, is it a war movie? Or is it, we don't know where to put it. So boom, you know. But I've got to say that Tim Robbins as the lead is an interesting casting choice, because normally he was known back then for comedic sort of good guy, jolly, you know, with perfect hair, a lovely grin. And when I first started watching this movie, apart from the Vietnam section at the very beginning, he's too nice. He's too normal. He's too kind of, and then bit by bit, you think, oh God, this poor fucker is going through something he does not understand. Okay, I'm going to say something here that may be contentious, but back in the early 70s, I did take a fair amount of hallucinogenic drugs. Okay, and starting off with hash and grass, that's cool. Yeah, that's, hey, Steely Dan, whoa. But then I moved on to acid, and it's like there are moments on an acid trip when things suddenly change without your control, and you see things that you've never seen before, and that leads to a bad trip, because you think, how do I get down from this? But your brain says, you start to think, oh, it's because I've taken and the other part of your brain cuts that bit out. So you don't know what you've done to get into this state. And so you are floating in this ghastly world of, I've actually seen my best friend in the 70s turning into a demon in a churchyard. And it's like, oh, fuck, you know. So when this movie came out and when I watched it properly, I thought, I understand this. That's why it triggers so much in me, you know, unlike any other movie, to be honest, I've ever seen, I think, about a psychological breakdown of a person. And it's not just due to post-traumatic stress or whatever. And then the most terrifying thing is the fact that the result of all this was caused by the government instigating a drug that would cause Vietnam soldiers to be absolutely malevolent killing machines without mercy, without any control. That's terrifying. To me, that's true horror, that the government enabled this thing to happen. And this poor guy hasn't got any memory of it. He keeps flashing back, you know, to lying in the wood in Saigon or the Mekong Delta or whatever, and seeing these people, you know, his own people coming at him. It's like, what? And then he wakes up on a tube train, or then he's being, okay, here's another, sorry, but the other element is his masseur, you know, played by the wonderful Danny Aiello. Is he an angel or is he just doing his job? Because there's moments when he's being manipulated by him and he flashes back to Vietnam and he comes back and it's like, oh, and, you know, the masseur says, it's okay, you're back now. And that, you know, that all of that is disturbing. And the other disturbing moment, well, actually two. The first one is he goes to the hospital to try and locate his doctor that he knows and trusts. So he goes up to the desk where there's a sort of hard-faced bint behind the counter. And he says, I've come to see Dr. whatever. And she goes, sorry, that, you know, there is no doctor, blah, blah. He goes, yeah, come on, I've been coming here for years. What the fuck? And she looks, no, I'm sorry, there's no record of any. And he gets really fucking angry. So he bashes the desk or whatever it is, you know, and a vase falls on the ground, breaks. And she bends down to pick it up. And there's something horrible happening on the top of her head. It's like sort of tentacles or innards. That's one moment, you know. And I just thought, fuck me, that is what I call a jump scare. Because you thought it was like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, Nurse Ratched or something, a bit stroppy, fuck off, you know. But just to see that little glimpse, and that's very clever, because it's just like a jump cut, you know. And then it's all adding to these, and the people with faces blurred out. I mean, that's, whoa. You know, sorry, you asked.
No.
An hour later, I'll answer it.
I think no, it's fine.
Okay.
I think Tim Robbins. I think you're right. I think it was this kind of unusual choice in a way. I mean, obviously, he went on a little bit later to do like
The Player.
Shawshank Redemption, you know, which is kind of like, you know, that's one thing, and it's a great performance. But I think in this it works because it's a similar sort of thing to, you know, the year before this you had Batman. And the amount of flack that they got for casting Michael Keaton, who was before then known for comic roles. But I think what people misunderstood about those people that can deliver those comic roles is the humanity that they have. Yeah. And if you know, in the same way that what Keaton brought to Batman for the 1989 thing, it was that kind of that twisted sort of, well, you know, if someone was going to lose his parents and turn to being a vigilante, you would have to be a bit cracked, you know. That's the whole point, you know, and that's what he brought to it. It's this insanity, you know. And I think with Tim Robbins, what you you had to have him as that nice everyman guy
Mm,
who is lost in this complete craziness, because it's very, there's a direct through line between this and
okay.
Alice in Wonderland. That if you had Alice
Oh,
in Alice in Wonderland being as
yeah,
crazy as
yeah,
everybody else,
yeah,
it
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
work. She has to be our representative in this world, and that's what Tim Robbins does. And he
That,
looks so lost.
that's a good point. I see. There's moments in the movie where he's normal and he goes into work after seeing the weird tentacle thing on the tube, and he's sort of all flirty and jolly in the post office, whatever it is. So you think, oh, okay, it's probably just a momentary sort of flash of whoa, what's that? And then other things start happening when he's stuck in the tube station. He can't get out, blah, blah, blah. But the nightclub scene where he's dancing, he's forced to dance by his girlfriend. Interesting character she is. She's sort of
Yeah,
part
yeah.
lovable and part
She's
sort of,
not. Yeah,
she's
she's
not
not
very
nice.
sympathetic.
No.
It's like she's happy when he's happy. But as soon as he gets a bit weird, it's like, well, fuck you, I'm off, And then he starts to get into
How
this sort
dare
of,
you be mentally ill?
yeah,
Fuck you.
yeah, it doesn't fit on my CV. The whole bathtub scene with the ice and everything, it's like, oh my God, I do love him really. But in the nightclub scene, she's saying, come on, dance with me, dance with me. And she's being all really kind of sexo. And all of a sudden, you start to see the tentacle thing again, but it's coming up this girl's thigh. And whoa, that's like, I've never seen anything like this in any other movie. It's like a normal disco scene, it could be Roadhouse, it could be whatever, turns into a vision of hell. And that's what intrigues me. And it's something that Clive Barker does so well, is that hell is you could actually define it as being something. Oh, anyway, sorry. But I think it was Sartre who said that hell is other people.
Yes.
But there's something about that moment in the nightclub where theoretically everything should be fine. He's probably had a drink or two. He's forced to dance. His girlfriend's really going for it. And then suddenly he sees this horrible event happening and he passes out. He drops his glasses. Oh, God. So I'm now blind. And people step on his glasses and stuff. It's all these little moments of humanity that make it even more terrifying, because it just adds to this terrible sense of, am I going fucking mad? And then finally he meets another guy who was a survivor who says, I've got to talk to you, man. It's just, they're after me. And he goes, what? What do you mean? But deep down, he knows what he's talking about, but he doesn't want to admit it. So he says, what do you mean? He said, they're following me. They're going to kill me. He said, well, who are? What are they? Well, they're demons. Yeah, and then he dies, and the trailer for the movie gives away too much, I think. If you look at the trailer, there's two key points that are revealed badly, I think. It's when he meets the fortune teller who reads his hand at the party or whatever. And she goes, well, your lifeline, that's really weird. Hey, it means you're actually dead. You're
Yeah.
I'll get out of it. And then there's another moment in the operating theater with the doctor. He says, well, you're already dead. You didn't need to do that, because part of the horror of the movie is when you realize he's actually dead. And of course, the ending of the movie, when he reunites with his dead son and they climb the stairs to the white light, it's like, in a way, I thought, oh, okay. But it's redemption, isn't it? He found the answer, that he was dead and he's with his dead son and they're going up to whatever.
Yeah, I think even if you kind of figure out the ending, or even if you're watching it again, and you say you know the ending, I don't. In some ways, yeah, that's one thing. I think watching it for the first time is a different experience, but watching it again, it's just a good film to watch and to pick up on what is being suggested. That's the key, and it's just as it's as in an interesting film second, third, fourth time you watch it, in the same way that I think that this film shares a lot of DNA with Carnival of Souls. It's a similar sort of
Okay.
concept, and
Right.
you know, it's not that difficult to guess the ending of Carnival of Souls, but it's not necessarily the end. It's not, to corner cliche. It's not the destination. It's the journey. That's the interesting part, and I think that's what this is.
Yeah.
And I think that this is, again, this has got to me, this is like it works on a lot of levels, but it is that dreamscape horror that they do really well, which sounds like an easy thing to do, but it's not. Very few people get it right. And I think it's also, apart from that, it's a great anti-war film, but not in a kind of overlayered obvious way, like those kind of
It's
platoons
not
or
an
those kind of
Oliver
things.
Stone job.
Yeah, it's not that, because I think the
We've
person,
seen it.
one of
We've
the
seen Apocalypse Now.
yeah,
We've seen Platoon. We've seen Born on the 4th of July. Okay, war is terrible, boom. But this is suddenly that's only the keystone of this whole fucking thing,
but for
because it is
me,
a man having a nervous breakdown,
yeah,
partly.
and the most interesting takes on that in terms of American culture and the American sort of war machine, it's not really your Apocalypse Now or your platoons and all that kind of stuff, which I much prefer the Heart of Darkness documentary to Apocalypse Now. I think it's better. It's just a more entertaining thing. But I actually, for me, someone like Sam Fuller was way ahead of his time. Back in the 50s and 60s, he did doing these films like The Naked Kiss and Shot Corridor. They were like David Lynch, 20 years before David Lynch was doing it. They really pulled apart. He was presenting us with these kind of weird sort of let's scrape away the surface of American culture to see what's really underneath. That's what Sam Fuller was doing, and he's presenting us with these bizarre, something like Shot Corridor. It's for those who don't know, it's set in a lunatic asylum, well, a mental hospital, and it's really, it's really sort of American society writ large. It's insane, it's mad, it doesn't make sense. The American dream will drive you insane. That's kind of the thing. But there's a character in there who is, he's a Korean war vet, and he's got a split personality, so he switches between being a kind of communist and a very sort of Civil War sort of southern sort of gentleman, and it's a really it's a brilliant film. And I think that's what this film does. It's not an anti-war film like a kind of fist in the air. It's not that at all. It's more about the human condition and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but it's also about what the government is capable of inflicting upon people to further their own involvement. Okay, well, that brings me on to the question of what is horror, because people always assume that, oh, you like horror movies. Well, actually, to be perfectly honest, I don't really like most horror movies. I find them predictable. With exceptions, as I may have mentioned earlier. But it's just that people expect now that horror has to have gore, it has to have jump scares, it has to have a masked, sociopath hacking up people, whatever. Or you get revenge porn, like I Spit on Your Grave or whatever, torture porn with Hostel and Saw and all that stuff. And the most disgusting thing ever is Human Centipede. It's like, fuck. Is that what it's come down to now?
Well, I don't know. I think that, I'm
tell
a
me
big
you didn't like it.
No. I'm a big advocate for 21st century horror. I think some of the best horror films have been made this century. I think what tends to rise to the surface and what tends to get, makes the money in your kind of your big sort of cinemas are the more obvious things. which I'm not necessarily a fan of. You know, I'm not really into sort of those kind of jump scares and all that. But I think there are really there's a lot of interesting stuff that's come. You know, if you think about stuff like the Babadook, or you think about Revenge,
Oh yeah,
all of these these really interesting
sure.
concepts. And the other day I was lucky, I got to see Late Night with the Devil, which is really good. I really recommend that.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff. Again, there's very much links to this film, to Jacob's Ladder, in terms of it's very much about dreamscape, and we don't really know what's real and what not. It's a really interesting film. I really recommend it.
I'm not dissing every contemporary horror movie. That's not my intention. But I do know what I like and what triggers something. Another movie that worked for me, I think it's called Devil. And basically, it takes place in an elevator.
Yes.
You know, that you don't know what's happening. And at the end, it's like, fucking hell. You see, that's clever. There's several of them, you know. I mean, I did find that the remake of The Ring was quite terrifying as well. It's just again, it's an idea that when that phone rings, don't fucking answer it. It's just a simple thing that maybe we could talk about over a cocktail or something. But somebody made a movie about it. And I love that stuff. But what I don't like is just the predictable Friday the 13th part 50 or something, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a whole culture in terms of, like, you know, in terms of horror films, particular, that there's a kind of cult film sort of, it's the collectors. It's not necessarily about the value of the individual film. I think people just go nuts for another Friday the 13th box set, which we don't need really necessarily, you know. And I think that it detracts from the fact that there are lots of interesting directors and writers out there doing stuff that is really good, but it's not necessarily getting the spotlight shone on it in the same way. But I think it is there. I think it's more. I mean, you'll know, obviously, you're in the business, but it's much more difficult to get an independent film off the ground now. It's just you know, Late Night with the Devil, which I saw the other day, which is great. But the opening, the credit sequence took about 10 minutes because there were about 30 different companies involved in putting this thing together. You know, it's just really difficult. But I think there are creatives, writers, directors, whatever you want to call them, out there coming up with some decent stuff. But I think when you say horror films to most people that aren't necessarily into horror or possibly don't like horror, what they immediately think of are those kind of more Blumhouse type jump scare, obvious things, and that is horror to most people. Whereas, you know, what you were saying there, I have a much broader sense of what horror is. You know, we have covered things on this podcast which maybe other podcasts wouldn't see as horror. You know, on one episode we covered Apaches, which is a 1978 public information film. It's half an hour long, but it's one of the most terrifying things you'll ever see. Because this was going out to kids in primary schools, but it was absolutely terrifying. You know, the film to me that you will never top is Threads. Threads. No horror film is ever going to come close to Threads.
I was just about to go there. But you see, that's the thing. What is the definition of horror? You know, for Joe Public, horror means vampires, zombies, whatever. For people like ourselves, horror is something more cerebral, more emotional. You know, I mean, that's why I do believe that Psycho, for example, which was an early influence on my strange life, is it horror or is it just a psychological thriller? It's about a very disturbed man, you know, but that's horror. Horror is not necessarily the guy with a mask on hacking up teenagers, you know. There's many things that could be defined as horror. Threads, as you say, I mean, the first time I saw that, I just thought, oh God, I want to hide under the sofa, you know. It's
but that's inescapable because at that time, I remember they wheeled us into assembly or whatever, and they made us watch that in school. And there's no
Wow.
escape from that. We were living at that time. This was 84, 85. That was a reality. I didn't think I thought my life was going to end with a mushroom cloud. And then you see Threads and it's just like, well, why are you showing me this?
Yeah.
Because they showed it in the same sort of session. They used to do these sessions like personal health and development, and they'd show us a film on STDs, or they'd show a film on
Yeah.
hygiene or whatever. You think, well, okay, fine, I can
Yeah.
do something about that. What the
Yeah.
fuck am I supposed to do about impending nuclear holocaust? Why? What? Let me live my life as a kid without, and let me try and push this as far into the periphery as possible. Don't bathe me in it. I don't need to know this. And Threads
No.
is brilliantly done. It's written by Barry Hines, brilliant
Sure.
and all that. It's fantastic.
It's
But
still
a lot of people pay me to write sort of essays and things and magazine articles and Blu-ray essays and all that.
Well,
I'll
you're
do
lucky.
pretty much anything that's offered me because I'll
Yeah.
find an interesting angle. If someone says to me, "Do you want to do Threads?" Fine, I'll do it, pay me, but I'm never going to watch the film again. I'll do it from memory, but I ain't watching it. There's no fucking way I'm ever watching that. My wife's never seen it, and every now and
Right.
again she'll say,
Don't
maybe we
don't
should watch
show
it. I'm like, no, honestly,
No.
I'm doing you a favor. Do not watch it.
Yeah. I mean, that is a very strange thing for a school to offer to kids.
It was normal then. It was kind of like,
I know,
I
but
think
it's
in the
not,
70s
is
and
it?
80s,
I mean,
it was about traumatizing
as you
kids.
say, yeah, a film about venereal disease or blah de blah, but what? Why would you want to show impressionable young people the possible of extermination? It's like,
I think it's because
what's the point of that?
that point in the sort of mid 80s, a lot of teachers who were possibly in their late 30s, 40s then would have been kind of ex-hippie CND crowd. And I think it was them trying to hang
Yeah.
on to that.
Well, I mean, I'm not of that age group, but I certainly, if I was a teacher, I certainly wouldn't show my students something like that. But then again, you see, as I said earlier, I was given Lord of the Flies as my sort of curriculum novel to read and digest, and I found it totally fucking upsetting. So what was the point of that? Because normally it's like Wind in the Willows or, something sort of harmless and lovely. But to this day, I do find that novel, along with Anthony Burgess's Clockwork Orange, genuinely fucking disturbing. So in some ways, I find those horror movies or books, I find Lord of the Flies is terrific. For me personally,
Yeah,
I find Clockwork Orange is horrific because it's actually happening now. I walk down the street to Sainsbury's local, there's 3 guys in hoods, it's like, whoa, okay.
Well, Clockwork Orange, like a few films are mentioned on here, it's, Clockwork Orange is a good example because it's brilliantly made. Obviously it's a Kubrick film. It's just a fantastic film, regardless. However, I mean, what Clockwork Orange does that, say, most horror films weren't doing at that time, it's that sense of nihilism. This is a character. There's no reason for this character to be doing. I mean, obviously that's the point of the film, but that's terrifying. If you had like a pre-credit sequence of Alex as a young child being abused or whatever, and we saw that, it would weaken.
You can
It's
understand.
just
That's why he became the Druid.
but we don't. You can't empathize with him, but yet the film is demanding that you go on this journey with him, and that's the most uncomfortable thing.
But of course, at the end, you do empathize with him after the Ludovico treatment or whatever. So it all comes down to what is one personal definition of horror.
Again, it's. I was speaking to someone kind of live next door but one, and they really don't. They won't watch horror films, which is fine, okay. But then I said, well, would you watch Schindler's List? And they're like, yeah, 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 it's a great film. How is that not horrific? How is that?
Exactly.
How is a horror film ever going to be
Yeah,
as horrific as that?
that. Yeah. Oh, exactly. I absolutely understand that.
Or even, Passion of the Christ. How is the Passion of the
Oh, don't
Christ
go
not?
there.
It's a 2 hour splatter film.
But it's torture porn,
Yeah, it
but
is.
with this sort of,
It's torture
so
porn with some added anti-Semitism.
yeah, and JC getting nailed up. But no, I think horror movie definition is overused and misunderstood. I do like the word psychological thriller. I would say that maybe Psycho is a psychological thriller. In the, and maybe Jacob's Ladder is,
Well,
it's only actually the other day that I realized why it's called Jacob's Ladder. Because the ladder was the name of the drug that the drug company gave to the I didn't know that, but it's only thanks to the wonder of Google. It's like, oh Christ, well that makes it even more disturbing. That Jacob's Ladder, is he climbing up or is he climbing down?
Yeah.
I
think that I think that whole I mean, I don't want to get too bogged down in it because I think it's kind of one of those, you see these fucking Guardian articles about it, and I don't know really. It's this idea of, well, actually, it's not a horror film; it's a psychological thriller. And I'm not, I think own it. If it's a horror film, let me fucking own my thing. I like horror films, but I do think I think there are kind of example. The example I would give is if you look at, you mentioned Silence of the Lambs, but if you look at Thomas Harris and his books. If you look at, Manhunter, for instance, the original kind of take on his books, I would say that is absolutely solidly a psychological thriller. Whereas I think if you look at Silence of the Lambs, I would class that as a horror film. And the reason I would do that is because if you look at it, it is to do with more the aesthetic. If you look at Manhunter, it's very white and clinical. And if you look at Silence of the Lambs, if you look at where Hannibal Lecter is kept in Manhunter, it's a perfectly white jail cell.
Yeah.
If you look at Silence of the Lambs, it's a horror dungeon. There's just those things that I would, people can disagree with me, but that's how I would define the more aesthetic horror versus more psychological thriller.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds a bit glib to say psychological thriller, but but that's equally horrific.
Yeah.
A disturbed person who does disturbing things is horrific. But it's just this generic term of horror instantly puts you into a category that maybe you don't want to fit into,
Because I
people
think
say that Xtro is a sci-fi horror movie. For me, when I did it, or even watching it now, it's nasty, but it's not a horror movie. It's a sci-fi movie. It's like, okay, what's the one with 1,000 things? Some Event Horizon. See, that to me is a kind of horror movie in space.
Yeah.
So what is it? Is it a space horror movie, or is it a space movie, or is it a horror movie?
Well, I think Alien as well. Alien is that, lots of people, this is not me saying this, a lot of people have said this, but I would agree. It's a haunted house film in space. It's
Agatha Christie in space.
Yeah. And I think it is and always will be much more effective than Aliens. I just think it is. It's just a better film, I think. And I would go, I've mentioned this before, but I would go Alien 3 over Aliens as well. I think Alien 3's got a really nice British charm to it. It's a good. It's claustrophobic again. I think that's what you lost in Aliens. It became this big macho American thing.
It's very macho, yeah. But I actually auditioned for a part as one of the aliens in that.
Right. What, in Aliens?
Yeah. Because I was a trained mime artist, I got the call because I'd done Jedi and Xtro, and they said, "Yeah, that's great," And then a couple of weeks went past, and they said, "Oh, sorry, the money's backed out. You know, we can't do it. So fuck off." And then of course it does happen. It's like, you know what? I'm really glad I didn't do that. Because I've done my weeks in a rubber suit. It's not a lot of fun. But Aliens is a great favorite movie of mine. But anyway, no,
it's good. I just don't think it's as good as Alien. I think Aliens just had this. I think, you know, it goes back. The first time I saw Alien, I was 11 years old. I was on my own in the house with no lights on. And you know, that doesn't leave you quickly.
No, absolutely. No, I totally understand that. I actually went to see the first Alien with a girlfriend, and we foolishly ate a little lump of hash before we went in, thinking it was a great idea, you know. And she spent most of the movie sort of like this. Oh my God, I can't. And I came away thinking it's like 10 little Indians or whatever, but in space. And that's really, this claustrophobic. One of my favorite TV shows at the moment is Black Mirror.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of that is about techno fear, which I find quite horrific because I would argue
a lot of things, most things,
obsessed by technology. We can't do anything without it.
It's terrifying. Black Mirror is absolutely terrifying, you know.
So the black and white one with the sort of
yeah.
You know the one I mean? That is horror to me. That is terrifying. There's no escape from this thing. It will get you. And maybe that's the thing about Alien as well. This thing is unstoppable. It's almost like the Terminator. Is the Terminator a horror movie?
I would say the first one is. Yeah, I would.
Yeah,
that's a horror film.
See, it's such a broad term, you know, but there isn't another word to describe movies that have an effect on you in that sort of way, apart from horror. You know? I did band a, you know, psychological thriller, but I'm just currently binging Ripley on Netflix. I mean, in some ways, that's a horror movie because it's a man without any emotion or compassion, getting rid of everyone who gets in his way. Is that a horror movie or is that a psychological thriller? Who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's similar arguments to had with Saltburn more recently. That I would argue that's a vampire film that's not a vampire film, but it definitely is. Anyway, we're running out of time, unfortunately.
Oh, bloody hell, fire.
I know. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you, though, Tim. Thanks
to you. I'm sorry I tend to ramble on quite a lot.
No, you'll have to come on again, and maybe we can do The Devil Rides Out or something like that.
Ooh, that would be good.
But anyway,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
So remember to call round next time. Make yourself at home. You look like you're dying for a nice cup of tea for terror.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.